Hi there. Hi, it's Cliff Andrews here. I'm broadcasting from my lovely shiatsu room in Norwich, UK, and just want to say thank you very much for attending this webinar. It's the last webinar of 2018, so it's a seasonal one. If you'd just like to say hi in the chat, and I'm just going to run through a few features of the webinar, and then we'll get straight on. And the theme is the Hara Diagnosis. What is Hara Diagnosis? What's going on? How does it work? And can we explain anything that's going on with Polyvagal Theory? And then we've got so many people saying hi. Fantastic to have you all here. And what I'll do is I'll start the slides now, and we can get on with the we've got a fantastically international group as usual from Spain, Germany. I can see Australia. Great. We've got more than one person from Australia. Thank you very much for coming. Yep, we've got a really international group all saying hi. So let's just start the slides. Okay, so here we are. Hara Diagnosis. Okay, here we go. So we've got 1 hour together. I just want to share some of the ideas that have come up in some of our research we've been doing with Polyvagal Theory. We're going to be looking at how Hara Diagnosis works, the special features of it. I'm going to give you a quick review of Polyvagal Theory. We're going to look at how alignment and centering can be linked with Polyvagal Theory. And then we're going to look at the Hara, how we could maybe figure out what's going on some of the time when we're palpating the Hara. And then what I'd like to do is take you through different stages of the autonomic nervous system and how it relates to different organs in the body and how that can then feed back to information about the emotional and mental states. Okay. And all this information, all the slides come from the recently released stress and trauma course that we've got running, the online 8-module course, which we launched a couple of months ago. And it's been an awesome hit all around the world. We've got over 120 people and people are joining all the time. So that's where this material comes from. It's been an amazing thing for us in the team because we've been doing a lot of research about the nervous system, and it started to make us really question a lot about what we're doing in shiatsu and how we can improve it with knowledge about how the autonomic nervous system works. So here we go. First of all, let's just find out if this is your first webinar, and it give me a bit of practice launching the polls, won't it? So I'm going to launch this poll, and I'd just like to let me know, or let us know, let the group know how many new people we've got. Okay. So it looks like most of you have been on a webinar before. We've got like 85% saying that they've been on a webinar before, which is like really cool. But we've got quite a few people who are new. So I will just show you around before we kick off with the main material. And 2 of you, not sure whether you have or not. Okay, well, this is a webinar. You're on one now. So let me just hide that. Okay, cool. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is what we usually have lined up for you in a webinar. Sometimes they're a little bit different, the presentations, but basically we've got me on video here. Hi there. We've got the slides. We've got some handouts to give you later on, some links. We've got the chat feature. Most of you found that. You can just say hi to everyone. You can ask questions as we go along. And then the other thing is it would be a good idea for you to have pen and paper handy, because we're going to do an energy work exercise later on. So if you've got pen and paper, just go and get that. We'll do that later on. So we like to try and keep it as active as we can. Okay. So what happened to us when we were doing when we were putting together the stress and trauma online course is we did a lot of research into the different stress states in the body, and we found out quite a lot about all kinds of things. But one of the things that really excited us was Polyvagal Theory. And that made us kind of think all about what we're doing when we do shiatsu, and particularly the importance of the hara. So it started to make us think, well, how does Hara diagnosis in shiatsu, how can that kind of work? Because what we tell ourselves when we do it is, okay, we're going to tune into these areas on the hara. And remember this chart, you've seen this. I'll find out a little bit more about your method in a minute. But yeah, we tune into the areas on the hara. That gives us information about the organs and about emotional and mental states. It allows us to diagnose the whole body system and enables us to plan our treatment. And we started to think about that and think, well, how can we actually explain that? Now, obviously, from Chinese point of view, Chinese medicine point of view, we can explain it. From a shiatsu point of view, but is there a way we can kind of explain it more from a Western side? Now, of course, there's lots of other explanations: connective tissue, energy fields in the body, biomagnetic fields. But we thought we'd just have a look and see whether polyvagal theory, which we'll come on to in a minute, might be able to start to give us some answers or some way that we can kind of be able to explain that connection between the mind, the emotions, and the internal organs. Okay, so what I want to find out first of all is, do you use the Masunaga Hara method? And that's the one on this chart here. It's this method of Hara diagnosis. So what I'll do is I'll launch the poll just to see where you're at with that. Okay, because I just want to find out if there's many people who don't use the Masunaga diagnostic method. Okay, looks like most of you do. Okay, so well over 90% of you use the Masunaga method, which is cool, because we're going to base this on webinar on the Masunaga Masunaga system. Now, this is an interesting book. I don't know if you've come across this one. It's a really heavy one. It's a Hara Diagnosis Reflections on the Sea, and it's by our old friend Kiko Matsumoto. I haven't seen her for a while, but it's very interesting because it gives a history of how the palpation of the hara developed, and it's got like old examples like this one here, like more pre-Masunaga systems. Okay, so what we do is you may use a slightly different hara method. Maybe you've kind of gone off the Masunaga system, whatever. Okay, but we'll use that as the main thread through this webinar. So let's just hide this up. Okay, so cool. Okay, so look, this is the map of the Masunaga system, which most of you are very familiar with. It did evolve from earlier systems, and you may have come across the 5-element system of Hara diagnosis. Some of the ones in Kiko Matsumoto's book, kind of moving towards the Masunaga system. But he was the one who kind of nailed it for modern shiatsu practitioners. And it's the one we're most familiar with in shiatsu, certainly worldwide, practitioners that do Zen shiatsu. And it's actually been used by a lot of other people who don't know the extra meridians, but that's another story, okay? So it definitely evolved. Now, one of the things that you notice about the Masunaga chart is that it's a little bit more anatomical than some of them, because some of the areas, let's say, particularly say the liver and gallbladder, the large intestine, the bladder, particularly, and with the stomach, for example, those areas are quite closely mapped to the physical organs in the body, okay? So you can see that he's just kind of moving slightly towards that direction of mapping it out, correlating with the Western organs. Now, another thing, though, that Masunaga was pretty well known for was his knowledge of the autonomic nervous system. And there's quite a lot of references to that, especially his unpublished work, which we can deal with another time. But just bear that in mind, anatomical areas and an interest in the autonomic nervous system, okay? Now, another very important aspect of Hara diagnosis, particularly with the work of Pauline Sasaki later on, was the emphasis on non-local touch. Now, this is very interesting because a lot of abdominal palpation methods focus, and you find that in Kiko's book, they focus on what happens locally in the area. So there's all kind of descriptions. If you read this book, you find there's all kind of descriptions. If there's a lump there, if this hurts when you press there, and if this is stuck there when you press there, it's kind of full of stuff like that. Now, the interesting thing about Pauline Sasaki's work is she emphasized non-local touch. So what she emphasized through creating the feeling of alignment, through the contact with the area, being part of an extension of the energy field, and also particularly with the mindset. So when you're focusing on the areas, you're basically tuning into a wider perception than the individual organ, like what's actually happening in the organ. So that idea of a non-local touch is something we'll pick up in a minute. Okay, so there's just three things to bear in mind there. It evolved from an earlier system. Many of the areas correlate to the actual internal organs, and there is an emphasis in modern shiatsu technique anyway, in non-local touch by the way we use our energy. Okay, now let's just see if we can find out whether you're familiar with polyvagal theory. Again, that'll give me an idea of how much time to spend on that. So let's share this with you. Right, how familiar are you with polyvagal theory? Just let me know about that. Okay, cool. Okay, pretty well split here. We've got 35% claim to know not much or nothing at all. But we've got slightly more. We've got 43% who know a lot about it, or they're very familiar, or they're a bit familiar with it. Okay, so maybe just spend a little bit of time just going through that and why polyvagal theory we think is so exciting with energy work, and also how some of it can map to what we do when we do the Hara. Okay, so let's have a quick skip through this. Right, first of all, I'll just give you a brief overview for those of you who are not or only a bit familiar with polyvagal theory. Why is it interesting for us as shiatsu practitioners? Well, they're very excited. Neurophysiologists are really excited because they come up with a new idea. The mind and body are connected. Yeah, I know it's not news for us because we've been doing shiatsu for several, Chinese medicine has been going for thousands of years and it's assumed, but it's a big deal for Western medicine. Okay, so it connects the mind and body. It's neurophysiological connections between the brain, between the primitive parts of the brain that govern emotions and the actual physical organs. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Okay. Now, what we've found that shiatsu and TCM theory map directly to polyvagal theory. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time towards the end of this webinar, and I'm just going to take you through some of the mappings that we found that excite us the most, particularly as they relate to the Hara. Okay. The other thing that polyvagal theory does is it directly links the emotions to the organs, which again is right in our ballpark. It's exactly what we're doing all the time when we do Hara diagnosis, particularly, and when we do shiatsu in general. And having an explanation for those TCM connections, shiatsu theory connections with neurophysiology, we think is like really cool. We think it's a good thing because it can enable us to explain why and how what the stuff we do works. Okay, so just a brief back step from polyvagal theory. Like when I did anatomy way back in the mist of time, and it might be the same for you, you probably found that you learned that the sympathetic nervous system activates and the parasympathetic nervous system calms down. There's like two branches of it. Okay, now what Stephen Pork has discovered not very long ago was actually there are two branches of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the two branches that developed differently in evolution. So what you've got the ventral vagus, which is the most recent form of the parasympathetic nervous system, the so-called mammalian vagus. Okay, and then you've got another older form of the vagal nerve, the parasympathetic system, which is the dorsal vagus, and they just emerge from different parts of the brain brainstem, and they basically work kind of together, but not really together. And we'll explain how that works in a moment. Okay, so let's just have a look at the mammalian or the smart vagus. Okay, ventral vagus first. Okay, now it's very interesting because what it does is it connects a lot of the nerves, the facial nerves that govern the face, facial expressions, aspects of hearing. In other words, being able to pick out social speech and things like that. It's called prosody. It's the ability to hear the frequencies of the human voice. Okay, it's connected to emotions and socializing, and also it has a very strong direct effect on regulating the heartbeat. So basically, the way it works is this: your heartbeat would normally, if it was left on its own, be beating quite a lot faster than it is now. And the reason that it's kept slower is because the ventral vagus kind of acts like a brake. So it basically holds it back. Now, the reason it does that is because when you get excited and you get creative and you'll get loving or connecting with people, your heartbeat increases, okay? But it doesn't increase because your adrenaline is going, because your adrenal system kick in. No, there's another stage. It happens when the ventral vagal system just takes the brake off a bit, and it allows you to keep sociable. You're not really angry, you're not fighting, running away. You're just kind of like sociable, communicating, facial expressions. You can hear what people are saying. You can see what's going on, okay? All that. But the brake comes off and you get excited. Now, doesn't that sound quite a lot like the fire element, the functioning of the fire element? Well, we're going to have a little bit more of a detailed look at that later on. Also, it affects the breathing because you want a bit more breath. You don't want to get totally adrenalized, okay? But you just need a bit more breathing because you're getting excited and you're getting sociable. And it's within that normal range of excitement and love and connection that the mammalian vagus, which is to do with communication, will operate. Okay, and so as mammals and as human beings, most of us work with humans, maybe some work with horses, but we certainly mostly work with mammals, with shiatsu. Not too much work for reptiles at the moment. So when we work with shiatsu, inevitably we're going to be working with the ventral vagal system. Okay, now the dorsal vagal system is completely different because it's unmyelinated. It's a primitive structure. It goes through the body. Some of it does connect with the heart, but it mainly connects with the subdiaphragmic organs. So it connects with the liver, the pancreas, the digestive system, and basically it connects deep with those. Okay. Well, like Alison works both with horses and dogs. So there we are. You see, I told you. Yeah. So the primitive or reptilian vagal nerve primarily affects the lower organs below the diaphragm, and the diaphragm is like a really important structure because it separates the area here, which is mainly under the ventral vagal nerve, and the lower part, which is mainly dominated by the dorsal vagal nerve. Okay, so that's basically the polyvagal theory. It's called polyvagal because it's two vagal nerves, not just one. Before Stephen Hawking discovered it, they always thought that it was just kind of like the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system were like this. Okay, so we can start thinking, what a minute. What about the Hara? Because the Hara is all down there, isn't it? It's all below the diaphragm. So that got us thinking, okay, about what might be happening. Okay, this is one of our favorite charts. We give this to loads of clients because it's so clear and simple, and we love it so much. We're going to share it with you, and I'm going to share it two ways. I'm going to share it as a download. So let me just do that. Yeah, I'm going to share it with you as a download. Okay, so you should see it as a like a JPEG thing. Okay, so you can download it, and you can print it out later and all that stuff. It's actually available on the internet. It's freely available. you just type Polyvagal Theory, and I've got an actual link to the actual chart as well, an internet link which I can share with you. Okay, so while you're downloading that, I'd just like to take a close look at it, and I've got my own my version here. That you can see it on the screen here. Okay, now remember I was talking about the whole social thing, everything is cool, the heartbeat increases because the brake gets taken off. That's the green zone down on this chart, okay? And this is where everything's going to be kind of balanced, and you're going to be able to be creative, like I was saying, loving, connecting. You can get excited, but not adrenalized, okay? You can have joy. And the sensation of being in the present, being compassionate, is all under this zone of the ventral vagal nerve. Now, if you want more information, you can download this, or you can check the link, which I'm going to send you now. Let me just, this is a featured action. Yeah. Okay. Nope. Haven't got that. Okay. Right. So just look at the download, or look at this one on the thing, and I'll find it for you later. Okay. Let's just have a quick look. No, it's not worked. Okay. Never mind. Okay, never mind. Just going to hide that so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, I'll do that later when we do the meditation. Right, yeah, so we've got 3 zones. Now, what happens then is when we get threatened or we get stressed, what happens then is we go out of that social engagement zone, and the adrenal system takes over. The sympathetic nervous system and the adrenal system work together, and that gives us the famous flight and fight reflex. Okay, so we're either going to like fight or go into a positive outward action with frustration, irritation, and then anger, rage. So we're going to be like getting into a fighting mode. Or the other thing we're going to do is run away. So you get that tends to be more like an anxious thing, get fearful, and we run for it. Okay, so that's the red zone. Now, normally what will happen is we'll be in the ventral vagal state, we're going to the adrenal state, and then what will happen is we'll come back down into the ventral vagal state again. And that's what normally happens. Now, the only problem is that if you get to a point where you get overwhelmed, where you can't fight anymore, for example, you're being held down by someone, or an attacker, or you're in a stressful job that you can't get out of, it can be any situation where you're overwhelmed. It can be a long-term stress that builds up, or it can be a short-term shock, like you're trapped in a car, in an accident, anything like that where you're overwhelmed. What happens then is the dorsal vagal system, which is the reptilian system, then kicks in, and it does what it can to protect you. And the only way it knows how to do that is what it used to do back in the day with the reptiles before we evolved into mammals. So what it does is it basically shuts everything down. And that's when you get clients that come in the free state, where they just kind of like starting to close down, everything's shutting down, and they just can't react to anything. They feel numb, they get depressed, and all their energy starts to go down and kind of become like a lizard, basically. Like everything gets colder, and they feel helpless. And then if that goes on, then they get feelings of shame and real hopelessness and preparation for death. They feel like they can't go on. Okay, so understanding where these different stages are very useful, because what we can do is what we can do is we can map those to the 5 elements, and particularly the organs and the zones in the Hara. We'll do that in a minute. Okay, so this is just one of the things we've been thinking about, is like the thing that's kind of occurred to us is like, well, why is the Hara so important? Because you think, okay, you've got the brain, okay, you've got the heart, it's all pretty important. And then you've kind of got all the intestines and stuff like that, and the bladder and everything. Like, why is the center of energy of the body placed in the lower abdomen, or in the abdomen in general, actually? Okay, you do need the digestive organs. But if you think about shiatsu and you think about Hara Diagnosis, it's like a big deal the dantian, the lower dantian is there. Okay. Well, that's very interesting because the ability to be able to immobilize without fear is one that enables us to reach a deep level of centering and a deep level of relaxation. Because if we can get into that state of stillness that's involved with the dorsal vagal system without going into the fear state, then we can create a feeling of stillness that we can't get from any other system. And that's one of the reasons why we believe that the Hara is such an important center of energy in the body. Okay. It's not kind of the thing you'd naturally go for. You'd naturally probably go for the conscious awareness and the heart. So there has to be a very good reason why all the traditional Japanese arts and things like that emphasize the Hara and emphasize meditation, alignment, tuning into the lower dantian, keeping quiet, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay, now look, here's an interesting, here's a chart. This is straight out of Stephen Porges' book on polyvagal theory. And what it does is it shows how social engagement system, which is very much connected with the fire element, by the way, interacts with the cortex, lower parts of the brain, and the cranial nerves, because all the different cranial nerves connect up and they kind of mingle up with the 10th cranial nerve, which connects to the dorsal vagal system. Okay, so, and we'll go back to that chart a few times in the next half an hour as I take you on a speed tour of how the different meridian systems map to polyvagal theory in different stages. Okay, so, okay, this is a hypothesis about the Hara. Okay, we tune into non-local information. Okay, and one of the things that we've been hypothesizing is that non-local information could involve a correlation with the autonomic nervous system responses. Okay, and they are the dorsal vagal system, the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, and the dorsal vagal, the ventral vagal, different stages that we've got on this chart that I hope you've been able to download. Okay, so what we thought we'd do is we'd go, we've got half an hour left, is we'll go for a whistle-stop tour of the different meridian systems. We'll look at the Hara diagnostic areas, reflect on how they connect with the above the diaphragm and down below the diaphragm, and then we're going to kind of correlate them with the different stages, the 3 stages of the stress and trauma response. Okay, cool. So if we thought we'd start off with fire element because of several reasons. Okay, but before we do anything else, I'd like to do an energy exercise with you. So if you'd like to get a piece of paper, I'll just get you a moment to get a piece of paper. We're going to just do an energy exercise connecting the heart and the heart center with the diagnostic area on the Hara. Okay, so just go and get your paper. Okay, so once you've got your paper, you might want to just center yourself. Okay, and we're just going to align ourselves. I'll turn off the video. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is just tune into your upper heater. In other words, particularly the heart. So we're going to tune into the heart organ and the heart center. Feel it as both the circulatory system and also the energy center of the body, the center of the emotions. Okay. Right, so now try this. take your fingertips, and I'd like you to, first of all, just press in just below the sternum in the heart diagnostic area. Okay, and I'll just turn the video on. So what I'm doing is I'm just placing my hand here in the heart diagnostic area. Okay, so we're just going to do that first. I want you to just, first of all, just feel the body tissue there, the tension or whatever in the diaphragm, the local feeling in the area. Yeah. Okay. So now let's see if we can establish an energy connection between the heart center and the heart organ and the diagnostic area of the Hara. Okay. So we're going to relax. We're going to open up all the joints. Connect. And now energetically connect from the heart diagnostic area into the chest area. Okay, so you're going from heart center, like the heart chakra area, into the heart diagnostic area. Okay, and now I'd like you to slide your hand down halfway down to the navel. Okay, and do the same thing. Relax, connect with the heart protector area and connect that up into the upper heater. Feel the connection between those two areas. Okay, very good. Okay, and then you can just relax. Okay, I'm just going to give you 10-15 seconds just to draw that connection. Okay, and then I'll come back and I'll show you my drawing. Okay, just draw a sketch of the connection between the heart center of the body and the diagnostic areas of the heart and the heart protector. Hey, how are you getting on? Pretty strong connections, weren't they? Okay, there's my drawing. So if you want to just describe what happened when you did the exercise, and you just pop it in the chat, and we'll monitor that as we go on with the webinar. Okay, so with reference to this area, okay, the heart and heart protector areas, we just tuned into them. They're the two uppermost areas. And the interesting thing is those two areas relate to, we've got some others as well, but particularly those two areas relate to obviously the heart organ and the ventral vagal system. Oh, Shubhada, here we go. Yeah. Interesting. Had more of a connection with the mouth, and heart was more on the front of the body. Yeah, I had a very similar kind of thing where the heart protector connection seemed to be more dense and kind of more physical, and the heart, actual heart diagnostic area just felt more connected emotionally to me, more to the whole heart area. Of course, it's going to depend a bit on your own energy imbalances as well, what kind of experience you have. Okay, so the heart and heart protector are connected to the above the diaphragm, So we need some way of connecting. So we've got that energetic connection there that we felt. And of course, from a physiological point of view, we've got the descending aorta that goes down. It's a very, very big connection. In fact, it's one of the main connections between the upper, above the diaphragm and lower diaphragm. Yes, interesting. A lot of you finding the same thing, that the heart protector area seems to be more connected to the structure of the actual body, and the upper area, the heart area, tends to be more on the emotional connection. Okay. So we've got a physiological connection there through the descending aorta. So let's have a look at some of the TCM theory. We're getting lots more postings, so we're just going to just keep an eye on those as we go on, because we've only got 25 minutes left, and we've got a lot more stuff for you. Okay, so basically the fire element in terms of Chinese medicine is to do with the mind and the Shen. It's very much to do with social engagement, love, compassion, and joy. The eyes, obviously the Shen reflecting in the eyes, tongue and speech. Remember the prosody, and through the triple heater, social listening. So all of those things map directly to the ventral vagal system. So let's just have a quick look and see what happens if we correlate it to this chart. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the fire element, Chinese medicine, we're going to put it through the 3 zones and see how it maps. Okay. So let's have a look first of all at the green zone. Okay. Now this is the area here on the chart where everything is cool. We've got social engagement. We're mindful of everything, aware. Compassion is a big thing. It's to do with connection. It's one of these mammalian things that developed in evolution. Okay. And it provides emotional connections. And interestingly enough, research has shown that if all those things are in place, our natural immunity will go up. And that's very interesting, because the triple heater meridian particularly is associated with the Wei Qi, and it's with the lungs, which is directly connected to our immunity. So there's a nice strong connection there between the triple heater and the green zone, ventral vagal zone of this chart. Okay. Now, what happens when we start going into the red zone? Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because when you palpate the hara of your clients, they are going to be in one of those 3 zones, or they're going to be fluctuating and having fluctuations between them. Okay. So it's quite interesting to see what happens when we go into the red zone, the adrenal sympathetic nervous system. Well, very interesting things happen. The blood pressure increases, the heart rate increases, that it increases more than just taking the brake off the ventral vagal system. Okay. Relational ability decreases. And the reason for that is because we don't care what other people are around. We're just going to fight or get out of there. And so our ability to relate to other people starts to diminish. Okay, it's part of a natural reaction, but it's something that your clients might tell you about, and that gives you like a trigger. Okay, maybe they're going into the red zone. And interestingly enough, the immune response decreases because the energy from the body is going into getting hell out of there or fighting your way out. Okay, so the heart is a very important part of that process. So what happens when we go into the blue zone, the dorsal vagal zone, okay, of this chart with a fire element? Very dramatic. Because what happens is blood pressure decreases and the heart rate decreases. Now, that's all part of the dorsal vagal strategy of shutting everything down. But it's definitely the things that we would most likely pick up when we palpate the hara. We pick up fire element meridians, okay? And these are the kind of things that we'll see. Social ability reduces. You'll see less facial expression. They won't have so much eye contact. You might find that their voice is kind of duller. And the other important thing, which we went into detail, don't have time for it in this webinar, but the previous webinar, we went into a lot of detail about the structure of the inner ear and how it evolved. And if you remember that, if you're on a previous webinar, but there's a big correlation between social hearing and the facial nerves and the link to the ventral vagal system. Okay. So They won't hear things in the environment, social things. They'll be shutting down. Obviously, sexual immune responses decrease, okay? And that's all part of the fire element. The joy thing starts to go down. And the other thing that can happen is you can have dissociation, which is another classic TCM sign of a fire element imbalance. If you know your TCM, it's heart blood. This governs, routes the Shen. And so that dissociation is one of those. So you notice that all of those three stages are things that will flag up as fire element imbalances with us, but you notice how they map perfectly to the autonomic nervous system stages in polyvagal theory. I think that's pretty exciting, actually, and it's made me distinguish and be much clearer with my clients where they are in those stages, and it's really made me much clearer about what I'm doing when I'm tonifying or sedating or energizing or calming different aspects of the meridians. Very interesting. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes. Do you want to, should we continue? Because we can do a similar thing with all of the meridian pairs. So we've done the fire element. And probably the next most important one in terms of the nervous system is the kidney and bladder. Now, this is very interesting for us as Masunaga shiatsu practitioners because, well, there's two reasons. One, you may or may not know this, but shiatsu was actually defined as a therapy in Japan as different from other massage and other physical techniques because they found that it had a specific effect on the autonomic nervous system. And if you look at Masunaga's work, you notice that he correlates the kidney and bladder directly with the endocrine system and with the sympathetic nervous system. And the reason for that is, of course, you've got the bladder meridian going down the spine. You've got a lot of correlations. You've got kidney energy to do with the will and so on. So let's have a quick look. Okay, we've got the two lower areas. Now, obviously, the bladder is related to the bladder organ because it's right over the bladder. And you probably have palpated clients with like bladder infections and things like that, where you can feel heat locally. The upper areas of the kidney diagnostic area seem to correlate with directly through into the kidneys. Because they're pretty much in line with them. And it seems to be a reflex area that connects with the kidneys and with the adrenal system. And that's another reason why kidney energy is closely related to the adrenal system. And that definitely correlates to some earlier forms of Hara diagnosis that you'll find documented, that this upper part relating to the left, sometimes to the left and right kidney, there's a correlation there, okay? All right, you probably know that the Z or the will, the Jing, supports the Shen. So that's another reason why the kidney heart connection is like really important in Chinese medicine. And we can directly map that to the consciousness, the social engagement system, the awareness, which is all to do with the relationship between the ventral vagal system and the cortex and the lower parts of the brain, and the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so there's quite a lot of correlation there. So the kidneys, let's just review our TCM. Kidneys house the Z, which is the will. That is obviously going to be related to the fight and flight response, and of course a freeze response as well, because when water freezes, we all know it gets solid and doesn't move. Okay, so we've also got the back, the skeletal muscles, which are related to the sympathetic nervous system. We've got the movement in the bladder meridian, which supports the work of the kidneys. Cool. Okay, so that's a very, very fast bit of revision of TCM. I hope you held on there. Okay, so now let's go back to our chart and see how what we often pick up in Chinese medicine can map directly to the stages of the polyvagal system. Okay, so the thing is, when we're in the green zone, okay, what will happen is we'll be able to rest, and that's very important for rest and recuperation, very important for the kidney energy in Chinese medicine. Okay, the sympathetic nervous system and the adrenal system are not in an activated state, so basically everything's going to be calm, everything's going to be cool. Okay, the defensive response, in other words, the fear response, which activates the sympathetic nervous system, is decreased. Okay, and the reason for that is because mammals and humans in particular rely on social interaction to assess danger. And that's very important, because what we do is we look around. Like if we don't know whether it's a dangerous situation, we look around to our parents and other people around, and we ask them what's happening, you know, rather than just going straight into fight and flight. Okay. On a urinary level, you'll have normal urination, and urination, as we'll find out in a minute, is strongly connected to the other autonomic nervous system states. Okay, so let's go into the red zone with the kidney and bladder. Ready? Okay, now here we are. We're in the red zone of the water element. Okay, we've got the sympathetic nervous system activated. We've got fight or flight. Now, fight, as we'll see in a minute, activates the liver energy, because you're going to be angry, you're going to want to hit them, you're going to need that muscle energy to hit them. But certainly when you want to run for it, you're going to need the kidney energy more than anything else. Okay, so the flight function, which you'll find on this chart here, okay, is very closely connected to the Z and to the impetus function in Masunaga. It's all the same kind of thing. Okay, now on an emotional level, fear and panic are the two things. Obviously, you need the fear to start yourself to get away, but panic is obviously, you don't want that if you can avoid it. In Chinese medicine, it's called activating the kidney yang, because we want to get moving. And you'll notice also on this chart here that one of the natural things that you do is you urinate, because you just want to get rid of anything that's going to stop you. And that fear response can often lead to uncontrolled urination. So that's one of the things you might pick up on the Hara. If someone's in agitated adrenal sympathetic nervous system state that's affecting the kidney and bladder, you might pick it up as kyojitsu, whatever. And one of the symptoms is they may find that their urination's been thrown off. Okay. So what happens if that goes on and you get to the overwhelmed state, right? Well, what happens? You get into the blue zone. Now, this is interesting, because one of the main things that happens is the body produces endorphins, and endorphins are part of the endocrine system, and the endocrine system is the system that Masunaga are closely connected with the kidney and bladder meridians. Okay, and the reason it does that is because basically it's the body's natural painkiller. So you're in a shutdown state, everything is probably really bad. I mean, you can't get out of it, you're trapped. So the body's going to start putting endorphins in to kind of numb you, especially if you're like an animal and you've just been caught by a prey animal. You don't want to be feeding too much. So that nature gives you those natural painkillers. Okay, just mentioning it because if you pick up kidney and bladder meridian in the Hara and you think, what is happening to this person? You know, they seem numb, they don't seem to be able to feel any pain. You may find that they hardly respond to the pressure. Then that could be one of the things that's happening to them. Okay. Now, also what you get also, of course, is like more of and the more extreme end of it, as you'll see on this chart. You hope your clients don't get to that level, but in fact, I've got quite a few clients at the moment that I'm working with who are right on the end here. And that's when you get real fear, hopelessness, and shutdown and preparation for death. And that is part of the whole freeze response. It's a last-ditch defense of protecting us from stress and trauma. Okay, so what we talk about in Chinese medicine is we talk about kidney and yin and yang collapse. Everything is shutting down. And also, one of the things that can happen because of the hormonal imbalances is you can get urinary problems, you can get retention of urine. Quite often, everything shuts down. So it stops everything happening. Basically, it freezes everything. So your digestion stops. We'll get onto that in a minute. And also the urination stops as well. Okay, so that could be something you find with extremely shut down clients. Okay, here we go. Andrea says, so trauma might lead to exercise addiction to numb the pain of trauma. Western medicine see endorphins as a good thing, but I guess we're talking about excess. Yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah. And you'll find that actually you do get exercise addiction, and it's not just because of that. It's also not just to numb the pain, but it's sometimes used as a strategy to get back into the body, because you get quite, especially you get right into the blue zone, you're going to get quite a lot of dissociation and out of body experiences, and also just not really feeling your body. So you'll find that a lot of people do that. They actually do like an exercise thing. And also because it tends to activate the sympathetic nervous system. So it's pulling you back down into the red zone, which might not be too much fun because you get a lot of emotional anger and stuff, but at least you're getting down more towards the green zone there. Okay, Andrea, so that's definitely what can happen. And sure, people can get addicted to those endorphins, and you do get people who are addicted to exercise. You know, I like exercising myself, probably for that reason. Okay, so there we are. Look how well that maps. So let's go on a little bit further and look at the liver and gallbladder. Let's do a quick revision. Okay, well, this is definitely two areas where the diagnostic areas in Masunaga system anyway strongly correlate to the location of the actual organs, and those organs will be affected by the dorsal vagal system. Okay, but let's see what happens before they are. Okay, let's have a quick look at the liver and gallbladder. This is TCM revision and shiatsu revision. Okay, they're to do with the free flow of qi. They house the hun, very important, the ethereal soul, which is embodied through your path through life. And to go through your path through life, you need to have your muscles and your joints all moving nice and smoothly, okay? But also, they store the blood and the qi, okay, which is another important thing, as we'll find out in a minute when we go through the famous three-stage chart, mapping it to the different aspects of the wood energy, okay? So let's have a quick look. Okay, so in the green zone, okay, what you find is you're orientated to the environment. You're curious and open. And here's a really important thing. The head turning, which is governed by the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle, okay, particularly the SCM muscle, both of those muscles are unusual because they're actually innervated by the facial nerves and by the cranial nerves. So that means that they're in the same set as all the facial expression, the hearing, social hearing, and all this stuff, including the head turning, is all under that particular part that's all connected up to the ventral vagal system. So this is very much liver and gallbladder, healthy liver and gallbladder, looking around, okay? You're looking around, okay? You got your eyes, okay? You're looking around, the muscles of the eyes, the whole thing, okay? That curiosity and being able to orientate yourself in the environment is really important. Now, the other thing, of course, is when everything is nice and safe, the liver's going to work really well. You're not going to have any indigestion. Everything's going to be working really well, okay? Everything is nice. It's flowing. Everything is flowing, okay? You pick that up, the liver feels good, okay? So what happens when we enter the red zone? Well, we get into the whole frustration, irritation, anger, and rage. And that's particularly if you go down the fight path as opposed to the flight one, okay? Because some people just like to run for it. And other people, for whatever reason, okay, prefer to fight. And if you're going to fight, you're going to go down this pathway here, which goes frustration, irritation, anger, and rage. Okay, now, does that ring any bells in Chinese medicine? I think it does, because that is wood energy when it's imbalanced and we have to act, okay? Now, the interesting thing is, from a Western medicine point of view, what happens is the fuel in the body, the availability increases and the storage decreases. And that's really close to the whole Chinese medicine idea of the liver blood and liver qi being stored in the liver and going out and being used to act, okay, which is kind of straight Chinese medicine. And that kind of fits really well with that. Okay, so now what happens is we go into the blue zone. Okay, here we are. We have got a frozen tree for you, just to emphasize it. And this is where everything gets conserved. We go into a depressed state, and depression is often related to liver stagnation in Chinese medicine. The storage increases. Okay, so that's the liver storing the blood. Okay, storing the qi, no blood is going out there. The muscle tone decreases. It goes flaccid when you go right into the free state, which is another thing you probably pick up if you picked up liver and gallbladder in the Hara diagnosis and you started working. You think, ooh, muscle tone is kind of a little bit kind of soggy here, okay? And that could easily be related to what happens when you go into the free state. It's like a hypo state, okay? And also another interesting thing with the liver is dissociation, because extreme dissociation, like out-of-body experiences, can occur in the free state. It's the final state of protection of the body. If you're going to get eaten by a lion, you don't want to be in your body, you want to be out there. Okay, so it's the final stage of protection. And that's exactly what happens with the liver and the Hun. Out-of-body experiences are the Hun leaving the body in Chinese medicine. Okay, so there's some really, really cool mapping there. If you get people in different stress states, you pick up liver in the diagnosis, you're going to figure out what's going on there. Just leaves two more left, and we've got 5 minutes. This is rattling through many of the discoveries we've made. We've got the stomach and spleen. Okay, now the stomach is pretty much over the stomach organ. The spleen area is in the middle, and they love the middle there, don't they? Chinese medicine loves the middle. It's the middle kingdom. It's the whole, you know, whatever, center of the earth and everything. It's actually over the small intestine organ in Western medicine, which, by the way, has the function of assimilation, pretty much like the transformation function of the spleen. But anyway, okay, it's basically to do with intestinal motility and things like that. So they are definitely both subdiaphragm organs. Okay, and in Chinese medicine, just to give you a quick revision, they're to do with digestion, salivation, and mastication, and we'll find out some interesting stuff about that later. The appetite mechanism, also thinking, the intellectual mind, and the transformation of food into qi. Okay, so that's got some interesting connections because, interestingly enough, this is like mind-blowingly good. The mastication muscles, in other words, your chewing muscles and your swallowing muscles, are all connected to the 5th, 7th, and 9th cranial nerves, which all connect up in the lower brain stem. They're all intertwined with the ventral and dorsal vagal systems. Okay, so it's kind of really, really interesting. Now, what happens is when we're in the green zone, okay, everything is cool. We've got social engagement, groundedness, the digestion increases, and your ability to relate and connect. This is all earth element stuff that we'll see when everything's balanced. Now, when we go into the red zone, though, okay, if the client is in the red zone, you pick up spleen and stomach, look out for these things. Decreased salivation, which is a Western medicine thing. The digestion decreases because you're running. Okay, so you can get digestive problems. You get worry, concern, and anxiety. And all of those things happen when we go into the red zone, if it's going to hit the stomach and spleen system in Chinese medicine. All kind of things that we're familiar with. And then finally, if you go into the freeze, this is what happens in Western physiology. You get fuel storage increases, okay, and the result of that means the appetite decreases. Everything starts to shut down, and digestive problems are very common. And so, again, if you've got someone in the freeze state, you feel stomach and spleen as dominant, then you want to think that maybe it's the dorsal vagal system that's doing that, that's shutting that down. Social behavior, which again is an earth element kind of thing, nurturing and stuff like that, obviously is going to decrease too. Okay, wow, this is a whistle stop. We've got 2 minutes left. So I'd just like to just cover lung and large intestine. Okay, now the interesting thing about lung and large intestine, we've got the upper areas which go right up against the diaphragm and obviously connect directly with the lungs. And the lower area obviously is directly connected to the large intestine organ. Okay, now lots of interesting stuff about that, but we'll do the same whistle stop tour. We've got lungs, bringing the key from the air in. It's to do with the Po, the material soul, and obviously positivity, grief, and the skin. Okay, large intestine is to do with letting go, elimination, the bowel function, obviously. Okay, so interestingly enough, the lungs are connected to the 10th cranial nerve, which is part of the ventral vagal system. So that's really worth bearing in mind because of what happens when we go from the green into the red and then into the blue zone. Okay, so we've got the lungs are regulated normally in the green zone. They're only increased through the vagal brake if we need it. What happens when we're in the green zone as well is the intestines, the movement intestine increases. And also, as we mentioned before, with the fire element, the resistance to infection increases. This is Western medicine. Okay, and we understand that in Chinese medicine as part of the lungs providing through the chest key, the Wei Qi of the body, connects with the triple heater. Okay, so it's another nice bit of mapping there. Okay, then we go to the red zone. Okay, look at that. That's a red tree in the wind. Breathing increases. Okay, that's all adrenal stuff. Breathing increases. So again, obviously, we've got someone who's in the red zone and you pick up lung and they're breathing like that, Okay, obviously because you need the oxygen for vital organs. And the other thing is it can cause bowel issues, because if you get into the red zone, not only do you urinate, but you also evacuate your bowels. And that can lead to sustained symptoms of bowel problems with long-term stress, okay? And so we can then take it into the blue zone. Breathing and digestion decreases, another thing to look out for. We're going into shutdown, and we've got grief, and another type of dissociation in Chinese medicine, which is the feeling of not being in your body. I mentioned that before, not really being in your body, okay? So look, that's some of the things we found out. We found out loads more. It's been a really, really exciting project working on the stress and trauma course. If you haven't looked at the course yet, or you might be interested, you can just go to newenergywork.com and just check out the free stuff. There's loads of other webinars you might like to look at. And then if you really want to get stuck in and join us on the course, then you can join up through the website. Okay, and the online courses last for 8 weeks, but you have lifetime access, so you can take longer if you need to, and you have lifetime access. It's kind of really, really cool and fantastic value and really good fun. And like I say, you'll be joining over 100 people worldwide studying this stuff to more depth. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. We've just gone a few minutes over our 1 hour. Thank you so much. Lots of people saying that they really liked it. It certainly helped my work and our work, the work of the team, no end. The number of times we've given this out, we even have them printed out in the office in a special folder because we're using so many of them, because it's so cool to be able to relate what we're doing in shiatsu. And with the whole polyvagal thing, just one fun fact to leave you with: 80% of the nerves that go from the organs in the body, up to 80% of them are afferent nerves. So in other words, your brain and your emotional center of your body is constantly getting information about how safe you are from all the internal organs. So what does that mean? When we align ourselves, we create a sense of safety, we place that very particular quality of shiatsu touch to the hara. What is going to happen? I tell you what's going to happen. It's going to regulate the autonomic nervous system. The emotional and mental state of the client is going to change. And that is just like totally nailed now. Western neurophysiology, right in the zone of shiatsu. And it's just very, very exciting connections. Okay, so thank you very much for attending this webinar. It's the last one of the year. We do them on the first Tuesday of every month, although in January next year, you'll notice that New Year's Day is actually a public holiday, so we'll be doing it a week later. We've got loads of interesting stuff coming up next year. We've got the new Shiatsu, the Scientific Basis course. We've got some fantastic information, and this is just one small part of it, Polyvagal Theory, which we're really excited about. That's going to be launched in the spring, so watch out for it. Make sure you look at your e-newses, and have a great holiday season, and I'll see you next year. Thank you very, very much.